Hey everyone, welcome to this week's video. As we are just a couple of days before Passover, I'm going to use this opportunity to share a story about Pesach, something inspiring. Number two, we're going to review some of the laws, some of the basic points, just very briefly. And number three, I'm going to give you an idea that you can take with you to share at your own Seder. So the first thing, the story goes as follows. This is about 16 years ago, right here at University of Chicago. We get a call a couple of days before Pesach from an older woman who is in the hospital with her daughter who is sick, very, very ill. And the mom says, I want to celebrate Pesach. Unfortunately, she didn't say it exactly like that because she was an immigrant from the former Soviet Union and did not speak English very well, but we understood that she wanted some grape juice and matzah for Pesach. Now, we were doing Pesach that year. We're doing a big Seder for students at one of the rooms on campus. And with all the hustle and bustle, we simply forgot to go over with the matzah and the grape juice. As we're walking over, we remembered it, and oh my gosh, we've got to get this woman what she needs. So we found a student, we gave him some matzah and grape juice and said, go to the hospital and deliver the matzah. Unfortunately, he was unable to locate this woman. I don't exactly remember the reason why. And sadly, she did not get the matzah and grape juice for the first night of Pesach. We were very, very upset about this. My wife, Bela in particular, felt really awful about this. And she said, tomorrow, during the day, I'm determined to go and find this woman. Unfortunately, we did not remember her name exactly the way it is. She goes to the hospital. And she says, I need to find a woman and her daughter. I remember the name starts with an S. I can't remember what it is. The guy at the desk says, I'm sorry, there's no way I can help you. She says, okay, can I speak to the chaplain? I was not yet an official chaplain at the hospital. So the chaplain on call comes over and says, yes, how can I help you? She says, I need to find this woman. It's Passover. It's so important that we get her this grape juice and matzah. She says, well, you don't know the name. She says, come to the office. Anyway, she came to the office with the chaplain, and the chaplain starts scrolling through different names. It starts with an S. And Bela was kind of looking at the corner of her eye through the list. And maybe she shouldn't have done this, but whatever. And she sees the name. She says, I remember the name. And she says the name, and she went up to the room. She came up to the room, and the woman was very emotional and very thankful. And we apologized profusely that we were unable to bring it. She shared the following. The woman said that she was obviously very upset that she didn't get the matzah and the grape juice. She said, what could I do? Here I am in the hospital. Her daughter was so ill, and finally, and she couldn't celebrate Pesach. So I called down to the kitchen. I said, please bring me up grapes, as many grapes as you can find. And she tells Bela that she squeezed all the grapes as much as she could into a cup so she could have 1 cup of grape juice. And she said to God, this is my Seder, this is my Passover. God, take it the way it is. Bela came home, tears in her eyes, and said that was the most inspiring moment I've ever seen. A woman in such a terrible, difficult situation, yet so determined to celebrate, so determined to commemorate her Judaism and her Passover, that did whatever she could to make it possible in some way, somehow. So that was just a little story. It happened to us here. Something that, as you can see, that's an inspiration that we live with, that really captured our hearts, the Jewish soul on fire at that moment. Pesach starts on Monday. A couple of very important points. What are you obligated on Pesach? We're not allowed to eat any leavened products, which includes beer or any leavened grain products, fermented grain. We start that at 10:27 a.m. in Chicago, and in your city, it may be at a different time. We're also not allowed to own chametz, and therefore I would encourage you to do this process which we have called selling the chametz. You authorized a rabbi, and the rabbi sells it on your behalf to a Gentile. You don't own it for the entire 8 days of Pesach, and it is bought back from the Gentile right when Pesach ends. I will put a link to it in this form in the video, a link to the form in the video. The other thing we have to do on Pesach is eat matzah. But matzah, the Torah says, must be eaten ba'erev, in the evening. So in Chicago, that's about 8-10 p.m. So if you want to start your Seder early, you might be able to do that, but the matzah must be eaten at nighttime. We're also obligated by the Torah to tell the story. So there's no chametz, eat matzah, and tell the story. We tell the story in a question and answer format because the Torah says, teach your children. As you and I all know, that when you come with a question, you're more open to listening to the answer. So the Torah said your children are going to ask. And if they're going to ask, you have to tell them. So we teach our children the story, and we teach it in 2 ways. We start with the negative and then go to the positive. We start with, we were slaves to Pharaoh, and then God took us out. Or according to the other opinion, which are both incorporated into the Haggadah, we start with the fact that we were once upon a time idolaters, and Abraham's father Terach was an idolater, but God took us close to his worship, and Jacob went down to Egypt, and then they enslaved us, and God took us out of Egypt. 2 points where we start the story. The maror, the bitter herbs, and the 4 cups of wine are not biblical today, but they also should be done after nightfall. So you could do some of the singing earlier if you want, or have the gefilte fish or the matzah ball soup earlier, but the matzah and the 4 cups of wine and the maror should be done after nightfall. Here's an idea that I'm going to end with that you can take with you. We know there are 4 children mentioned in the Haggadah. The reason there are 4 children mentioned is because the Torah says your children will ask 3 times, and a 4th time the Torah says, tell your children, which means it's not asking the question. Why the duplicity? Because there are different types of children. Different types of children that come to the Seder. So, 2 things I want to share. Number 1, there is the 5th child. The 5th child is not even at the Seder. He's not even present. And the Rebbe made a big campaign. There should be no 5th children. There should be no one outside of the Seder. In fact, Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs, whom you know I like quoting, once wrote a letter, and he said that true, there are 4 children at the Seder. And they're different. There's the wise, the wicked, the simple, the one that doesn't know how to ask. But they're not having separate Seders. They're all at one Seder together. They don't agree, but they're all together. The idea of Jewish unity is critical and so vital and so essential to our identity. Everyone should be at the Seder. No one should be left outside. When there was a campaign to have empty chairs for the Jews in the Soviet Union, the Rebbe said, what does it help them? Bring someone to the Seder. There's no empty chairs. Add a chair. Add a table. On Pesach, we achieved our freedom. Freedom to do what? Freedom to go to Sinai and accept the Torah. That Mitzrayim, Egypt, in English, means boundaries. Yetziat Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt, is leaving those boundaries, leaving those limitations, leaving those inhibitions, the things that restrict us, to break free of all the things that hold us back. So instead of being slaves to materialism and slaves to the isms of the day, we were now free to serve God, free to allow the expression of the soul, the true expression of our identity, which is why our sages tell us in Pirkei Avot that the free person is the one that studies the Torah. Even though they are now accepting upon themselves to fulfill the mitzvot, which doesn't seem like freedom, in reality, what it is doing is it allowing the freedom of the soul. It's allowing our soul to say, aha, I can breathe. I can do what I really want to do, which is to do something higher than just serving myself, to serving God and to serving others. That is, at its core, the idea of leaving Egypt. We leave Egypt, we leave those restrictions and boundaries and limitations for something higher than ourselves, something greater than ourselves, which is the Torah and the mitzvot. We're looking forward to an amazing Passover, an amazing Seder. If you want to be a Seder sponsor, please help us make this an amazing Passover for students at University of Chicago. You can do that online at chabaduchicago.org/Passover. The link is right there. And with that, I'll wish you a good Shabbos and a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a wonderful Passover.